Hi Katherine, thank you for joining me for our Women Who Make It Happen series.
No worries, thanks for inviting me, Michelle.
You're welcome. Would you be able to introduce yourself and give a little bit of a brief overview as to your career thus far?
Yeah, sure. So, Katherine Waller, and I am co-founder of purpose-led wealth advisory firm 6 Degrees, which was co-founded in November 23. So, 15 months in now, which I'm sure we'll come on to, but a very exciting journey being an entrepreneur, something completely different, because prior to that I worked for 2 large corporates, RBC most recently, and then HSBC prior to that. Always in giving advice from a wealth perspective, looking after individuals, families, both on investments, planning and lending actually primarily. And that career sort of spanned being really junior and working all the way up, and then being in the leadership team at RBC, so strategic, head of new business for the bank, which came with lots of learning along the way as well. So a career spanning sort of 20 odd years in finance. I'm also a mum to 2, Freddie and Lottie, and who are 8 and 5. So that is all sorts of fun. And I'm very busy. So that's me.
Very good. And what motivated you initially, would you say, to work within the financial services sector?
I guess when you're younger, you sort of go with what you're good at. So maths was sort of my strength at school, if you like. It came to sort of choosing university, and I wanted to do something a bit different. Other people will have heard me talk about, I chose to do finance and philosophy, 2 incredibly different disciplines. And that was led by, I love finite answers, maths, great, super for that. But then I also love to understand people. But I was quite opinionated as an 18-year-old and didn't really listen a great deal. And so I quite liked the idea of sort of understanding fate, determinism, philosophers in general a bit more. So I read a book called Winnie the Pooh and the Philosophers, and on the back of that decided to do philosophy with maths, finance at university. So that was sort of the driving force. And then I got to the end of that, and I actually enjoyed the finance side of it more than I did the philosophy. In hindsight, I learned more in the philosophy than I did in the finance. But on the basis of that, I decided to look for a job in the city. I wanted to be in the city. And I basically applied everywhere, because I had
That's
no
the way to do it, though.
It is. Like all the places, all the boards, Reed, Monster, I don't even know if they exist anymore. But literally pressing all the buttons, because I think you don't know what the roles mean. It's a very closed industry to understand what jobs are out there and what those jobs actually mean. And so I basically just applied for anything and didn't hear anything, so decided to apply randomly for a betting company. And which I got the job at, so I moved to London. They signed all the paperwork, beautiful, you can move into this flat in London. And then they decided to move to Leeds. And so they asked me if I wanted to be made redundant. My first job in London.
Oh, wow.
Interesting. To which I said yes, but they allowed me on the basis of that to interview everywhere. And it just so happened that at the day in which they told me, HSBC came back to me on a possible interview, and being someone who believed in fate and determinism, that I went for the job interview, and I was lucky enough after a few rounds to get that job. And that sort of started it really, and I've loved it ever since.
Good. That set the foundation for you to excel in FS. Here you are today.
Yeah, Winnie the Pooh and the Philosophers and maths. Excelled it.
You did make a point when you were talking about RBC, there was a lot of learning. What do you think was the biggest learning point for you there?
That's interesting. I have grown up in finance, and so I was with HSBC for 8 years in the end, and then I was with RBC for 11. But that was, late 20s, early 30s, lots of change going on in life generally, but also I've always been very driven, and that was a very not new wealth management firm as such, but it wasn't as well known and well established in the city as a lot of other brands were. And that was one of the reasons I moved there, actually, from a huge brand that is so well known. I sort of thought, if I can prove myself anywhere, I can prove myself in something unknown, and I might as well take the leap. And so that was why I moved. And then I had the privilege of working with some incredible people who recognised points of strength and difference and taught me, but also made me really self-aware, and gave me opportunity to really progress from just looking after clients to then I was successful at building relationships and then teaching others how to do the same, and coaching people, and then that expanded into having a team, and then more broadly actually running that team and being part of a leadership team where you're making strategic decisions about what the business is going to do going forwards. And by virtue of that, there are lots of learnings along that, about yourself, about how you receive feedback, about other people, and how they like to receive feedback, about what you think you know versus what you do and don't know, and where to be confident and where perhaps to be a little bit more reserved. Honestly.
That's interesting. And when you said you took on that team and went into more of that management, the strategic and the senior leadership, was that always your goal?
I'm not a big dream person. I've never had that massive dream in my career that I want to get somewhere in the end. It would be disingenuous to say I was. I sort of live every day. That's going to sound really like I wing it, but I don't. I've always been passionate and driven, and I've always known whatever I do, I want to be the best at. And so if I can keep learning, keep developing to be the best, and that gets me to a more senior position, great. But that was never the goal. It was more of a goal to begin with, to be taken seriously, then to know I knew the most in the room, then to be respected and to enable and to empower other people, and that breeds trust, mentorship, coaching, and that creates leadership in my mind. I think there's a difference between leadership and management.
I agree.
And I try and embrace both.
So what's your style, respectively, for those?
I do empower. I think words used to describe me would probably be a good one. Some good, some not necessarily, dependent on your view. But I think I'm bold, I'm direct, I'm courageous, I'm ambitious. I care. I'm really thoughtful around the way in which I position things, and I hear people. Very empathic. And clearly very visual, moving. I ask people what they think, and I listen to them, and I coach them to think more broadly. And so I'm very passionate about
comes across.
Thank you. About my own learning and other people's, and I want to develop other people. I've always thought that if I can develop someone to be better than me, then that would be a success.
It's a job well done.
I that's how I think that I developed. I had a number of different people that I believe that I took the best from, and I want people to do the same from me, and I'm happy that they give me feedback on the areas that they think I should develop as well. It's very two-way. I'm also really passionate about diversity of thought, diversity in leadership, diversity in neurodiversity. I'm really passionate about, I write a lot about, and I and that's, all of those are really important in the way in which I think value others, and strive for success for the whole rather than individuals.
Yeah. There's a couple of points there that I think are really powerful. I'll keep on the DE&I train. How do you kind of like ensure that is maintained to be an important policy maybe for you and where you're at the moment, but very ingrained in your belief and how you want that to be, essentially carried through? What do you do now?
It's a good question. So 6 Degrees is purpose-led, and what I mean by that is both the business and our relationships with our team and our clients. And by purpose, I don't necessarily mean philanthropy. I mean the general dictionary meaning of purpose. What is important to you? What drives you? What is the thing that you want to achieve? What values underpin that? And by virtue of that, that means both obviously from a client perspective, the relationships are much deeper. They tend to be conversations about money that are deep-rooted in our experiences in childhood. But that also feeds through to the culture in the business. We have a mission, we have a purpose, and we have very clear values. By virtue of that, we use that language in every interaction as a team. And I think that therefore that shows that style of empowerment. We understand each other's values, we talk about them actively, and I think that brings to the forefront actually each other's pieces of learning. Take cares is really important as well to us, but also development and success. To answer the question.
Yes. How did you find that then? It's quite an interesting one where you've worked for very large corporates prior to co-founding 6 Degrees. How have you found the differences in that kind of DE&I strategy?
That's a good question. When it's your own, you create it. I mean, it seems really obvious, but it's so exciting because it is what you want it to be. So we are 80% female, and that is not intentional, by the way. It's just by virtue of... Exactly. It is all about having the right person, hiring the right person. And actually sometimes it's not even about what role you want them to fulfill. Funnily enough, we've just put an offer out for a 6th person. We're a relatively small team. And that experience has been interesting because clearly that is, nearly 20% of your workforce by hiring a new person. That creates a huge impact if you don't get that right. And so understanding that individual's personality, their strengths and their take cares, how their personality matches or is the same or different to other people in the team where that fits.
It's like the cohesion, you've got to get it right.
Exactly. And actually what happened was the role we put out for versus the role that we actually think that person might end up doing is completely different because it's about the person, because we believe that that's the person is the right fit for 6 Degrees, not that actually it's role specific. And that's been the way all the way through. It's about hiring people who have heart, passion and soul and believe in 6 Degrees. They don't have to have the same values as us, really importantly, but they do have to have values that are ingrained in them and a purpose for us to want to hire them ultimately. And by virtue of that, that creates a team that is so collaborative, but also can drive change for the business. When it's a small team, you can make those changes. We're very, I don't know, we're trying to forward think with regards to our policies. I have a great friend who runs a super business that is a school clothing business. And he said to me, Katherine, the way in which we empowered a lot of our staff when we came back from COVID was to determine the working hours that we knew would be most flexible for everybody. And he said, when you're creating 6 Degrees, have a think about it. So Ollie and I talked about it, and where we landed was our mandatory hours, if you want to call them that, dependent on the number of days you do, is between, or no matter how many days you do, is between 9:30 and 3:30.
Yeah.
With an hour lunch, clearly. And the other hours in the day week that you want to do must be done between the hours of 6 a.m. and 10 p.m. We're not tying you to when it is, because some people work better in the morning, some people work better at night, some people are up early with kids, some people aren't and want to do it after they've been out for drinks with friends. Whatever it is, we want you to be able to fulfill your life and have that balance with your working life. Yeah. And that's really important to us because it breeds passion for our business, that not only does it fit with that individual, but they also want to give more because it's working with them. I said I had 2 kids, Freddie and Lottie. It clearly works for me as well at the moment, but as they get older, that I think that will still work. There'll still be things I want to do at different times of the day. And I think you get the best out of people by having that flexibility.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, it's the productivity. You can't essentially say it's the same rule for everybody. It's very refreshing to hear, actually. And I think if a lot of others took a leaf out of that book, then productivity may change, may increase. So yeah, it's very refreshing to hear.
Good. Yeah, no, we it's important to us. As so Ollie, as well as co-founder, we had different experiences at the bank when I did share parental leave, he had paternity leave, and we had different experiences in that time. So and funnily enough, I think mine was perhaps a bit more positive actually, and so we try and bring those experiences in as well to make sure, again, from a D&I perspective, we are thinking about everybody in a ecosystem, in a family network that is impacted. It's the same when we think about our clients. Very often you will have the spouse that is typically deemed to be the wealth generating spouse, but we believe actually it's joint. There is the person who supports you is just as wealth generating as the person who perhaps is given the money in the end, and that's really important in conversation. It's really important to explore feelings around that, and so that transparency, those vulnerabilities feed through from our client relationships all the way through to our relationships with our team. Yeah.
And what's next for 6 Degrees?
So it's a good question. So the reason we created it in the first place is there was a gaping hole in the industry on this point of purpose, really getting to the crux of why people do what they do and what drives those decisions, those values that are so deep rooted, but also the coaching and mentoring that comes with the depth of relationship with money. Yeah. And but because there is a gaping hole, we also want to take the industry along with us. We want them to be engaging in the difference between having the left hand and the right hand side of the brain. Forgive me if I'm teaching you to suck eggs, but right hand being more emotive, empathic, creative, and left hand obviously more numbers driven. And it's so important to have the both. But very often when you go into a financial conversation, it is led by that left-hand side of the brain. So we want the industry to change for the better of all individuals out there, to be more balanced between the left and the right, and to understand which one is perhaps at the forefront and unpick that to then deliver the right strategy for those families for the future. So growth, successfully delivering on the mission, and having more clients and families as part of the 6 Degrees family along the way.
Yeah. Well, I wish you were. It sounds like you are certainly venturing into, you're setting the precedent with the purpose of what 6 Degrees is about and what you're looking to achieve. I do want to circle back. You mentioned, obviously you like to coach and develop people, and you said that you'd learned from others as well. So was that in the form of like a mentor or a mentee or role model perhaps for you? What did that look like?
I think for me, there's no one person that I can say, do you know what, they've been a role model for me. I've wanted to follow their career, or I think there's been group of people, both personally and in my personal life and in my corporate life. And I tend not to segregate between the two, actually, interestingly. I'm the same person I am wherever I am. Personally, my grandma is the most resilient, independent human you can possibly ever meet. And she has taught me how to be fiercely independent, but also how to be vulnerable and how to be transparent, direct, bold in my wantings, in my ambitions, and supportive. And that role has changed throughout her life. She's now 96, I want to say.
Oh, wow.
And she has survived all sorts of incredible things in the last few years. And with that has come change in her, and that has taught me along the way as well. So from a personal perspective, that vulnerability I see in her now that I perhaps didn't see 10 years ago is really powerful to have learnt from. Then from a work perspective, I have been so lucky. At HSBC, I had 2 individuals who gave me their time, their energy, they taught me. I mean, some things they taught me within an inch of their life. They used to make me repeat things over and over so that I knew everything. And so that because I was young in my career there, and I was going into meeting rooms with very wealthy individuals, I had to stand out with my knowledge. And so they drilled me on stuff. Yeah. And that meant that I was the most knowledgeable person in the room, and so I have to be thankful for that. They're both very different in their styles, and so both tried to impress on me their writing styles, of which I am very clear today that I never want to change anyone's writing style, because that writing style is deliberate and very shows someone's character actually in the written word, I think, and can do, and I think that is really powerful in the relationships you have, and so I'm very careful not to do that now. And then when I was at RBC, I had a few people again who supported me, who made me aware of my strengths and where to take. I used to take care, because they are things to develop, but they're things that can be overpowering in a conversation. And if you're aware of them, you can dial them back. I can be very excitable. I can be very, imagine.
It's the passionate
yeah,
side.
Exactly. But that can be quite overbearing sometimes for some people. So I have to be aware of when to rein that back in. And so that's a take care for me.
Yeah.
And being made aware of those things, being taught how to use that passion, has come from both mentors in the bank, but also they afforded me the luxury of having coaching, and those coaches have also helped me on the way. So in a long-winded way of saying, lots of people and no one person.
Yeah. And obviously that's reflected both through personal and professional, as you said. I think it really helps to shape. I do believe in your genuine, authentic self.
Yeah.
So being the true version of yourself, personally and professionally.
Yeah. Imagine how tiring it would be to be different in both environments. I mean, it just.
There was something I wanted to ask as well. So you've talked a lot about like being very aware and reflecting, and dialing back when you need to, or certainly showing the passion and the energy. What would you say have been maybe like your key success factors for getting to where you are today?
Always saying it. That is a huge benefit, but also a huge take care. I wear my heart on my sleeve, and my face tells a million stories, and I can't really hide when I feel something. So I have to be really careful about that. And so my biggest learnings have been when to use that to my advantage, and when to help others read that in a room, especially when you are. I believe that if there's more than one of you, you can get the best success because you think differently. So again, back to that diversity of thought, which is why I have a co-founder, right? Ollie is entirely different to me. But then he also needs to read me. And so when I'm trying to cover perhaps my obvious state of what I think. He also has to learn what I'm trying to cover, and that's been a really interesting journey for me and for other people to learn. Forgive me, remind me.
Like key success factors. What do you think has been like the turning point for you, or?
So that I think showed me that that empathy, that emotion, that is very different in the financial, or used to be very different in the financial services world.
Yes, I agree.
And that embracing that as a difference and showing other people that that could be a success factor when working and partnering with clients and in your career, I think was hugely defining for me. And I think that started quite early on. I think I realised quite early on that was going to be important. And so I believe that that's been something that people have seen in me throughout my career.
Yeah, interesting. What are the main differences, I think, that you've seen from TradFi, the very big corporates, moving through to co-founding your own company now over the years? What are the significant differences you think you've seen in the industry?
I mean, it's changed hugely. It's a good question. I think that the, dare I say it, embracing of difference has come on hugely.
And that's along with the DE&I policies now that are embedded within most organisations.
There wasn't many females when I started in wealth management. There wasn't many females when I left wealth management, interestingly. And so, or in a senior leadership position. And there certainly wasn't many people who were neurodiverse in that situation either. And so I believe in very much embracing that. And so that's where we are today in 6 Degrees. It is about diversity of thought. It is about individuals. It is about difference, and all of those things are accepted and actually seen as strengths and understood and taken time to understood and hear from people.
Yeah. And then I think just as a final note, you've talked a lot about your own reflection, your own awareness and what's worked for you, and obviously excelling to where you are now, co-founding your own business, which testament to you. What would you give as like points of advice or encouragement to younger female talent coming through the industry? What would you say?
Never stop asking questions and being curious. From what is that job? What actually am I supposed to be doing? What does that title mean? What do you actually offer as jobs, from your finding out what happens in financial services, all the way through to how can I develop, how can I get better, how can I learn from you? What is always embracing feedback, asking questions about that feedback, and be the strongest in the room at the thing that you are most passionate about, and show that passion, because passion and curiosity are the two things that I think people want to know more about, they want to understand more, and they really are excited in talking about themselves. So if you are curious and you're passionate about what you're hearing, then you can't go wrong, really.
I think that's great words of advice. Thank you, Catherine. Thank you for joining.
Thank you for today. Thank you.